This is Sarah.
This is Jenna. We're from Name 3 Songs, and today we're getting candid with Friko.
Hey, we're back, and you're listening to Getting Candid with Name 3 Songs, and we have some pop culture craziness to go over at the start of this episode because this week's been insane. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, if you're a pop culture fan, if you just like are paying attention to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, because some major like fake news about their relationship was like leaked on Reddit in regards to the fact that somebody posted some photos of like a relationship contract or like an end of relationship contract that made it seem like this was coming from Travis Kelce's like PR team. Like it had their logo on it and everything. And it was like this document that's like, okay, Taylor and Travis are ending their relationship on September 28th, like blah, blah, whatever. And like, okay, I know PR relationships are real. A lot of the times PR relationships like become actual real relationships anyway, but like whatever. I'm not a Swiftie and I fully am like, that girl's so smitten with this man and that man is so smitten with this girl. There's absolutely no way. But also like the stakes are so high of this relationship that like it would be career ending, life ending insanity to leak this document on the internet for clout. Like that would be crazy. Like no amount of clout is worth that.
Yeah, true. And now there's probably gonna be a lawsuit. Like Travis Kelce's PR team is investigating this with Reddit on like an illegal capacity because it was like false documents that claimed they were from that PR company. So it's crazy that like, who would do this? Who would do this? Like, is this a Swiftie who's like, I really don't want her to be with Travis, who just like made this up and is now like maybe gonna have a lawsuit? Like that is crazy.
It's just
that
so
is crazy.
Yeah, so crazy because also like people on Twitter are like speculating like, oh, like this looks like it might be like a high school project because the verbiage and all of this stuff feels very young and incorrect in regards to just like legalities, whatever. But could you imagine like if you're some high school student and you like shared this, because it looked like the photos were shared through like Snapchat, and like what if one of your friends takes your weird assignment and posts it on Reddit as if it's factual? And it's like can you just imagine this like Swiftie who's like, oh my god, like Taylor, like who's like headcanon
it's on the front page of People.
Yeah, but like I'm just like imagining like this like a Swiftie who's like, oh no, like Taylor Swift and Carly Kloss for life, and she like makes they make this like Taylor Swift like breakup document, whatever, because they're like, no, like Taylor Swift's gonna come out as gay, like that's what's gonna happen, and then they find out that their friends are spreading rumors on Reddit that this is real, and it's like
embarrassing.
Oh my god, crazy.
If you want to hear more about this, we talk about this stuff on our podcast, Name 3 Songs. Last week, we talked about Charli XCX's Brat album and the societal and cultural impact it was having. Both the album itself, what it says about society, and then the larger impact of the branding and how people made it their own, and it made it all the way to the presidential election in the US.
So on last week's show, we talked about Sabrina Carpenter and Addison Rae and how we're in this like new era of pop girl madness. And this is just following in trend because Megan Thee Stallion got a really cool Pepsi ad with like all of the hottest NFL American football players. And we talked on our podcast episode more in depth about Addison Rae and her song Diet Pepsi. And so Pepsi's having a moment, pop girls are having a moment. And also this ad being gladiator themed is another thing that is referencing back to Pepsi ads of yore.
Yeah, so in the early 2000s, there was like a Pepsi ad that was Beyonce, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera dressed as gladiators going to fight like in the ring against tigers and all these things. And it was the We Will Rock You song. Yeah. And so they basically did a remake of this with Megan, except Megan was in the ring. The football players were in the ring. Megan was like overseeing everything, being the queen that she is. She does like a rap over it. It was so funny. She just like, she's like the We Will Rock You. It's so funny. I love her so much. But it's just really interesting to see like Pepsi maybe having a comeback. Cause I mean, like, I feel like early 2000s, like commercial marketing was so intertwined with pop culture, like all of the Got Milk ads. And like, especially when it came to Super Bowl season, like there were so many advertisers who were utilizing celebrity power. And I feel like we've kind of like, it looks very different now. And so now it's like Pepsi's redoing this in a way that's very fun and like culturally relevant and gets people talking. So it's kind kind of interesting to see if we'll see like a trend of more of this happening, if it will take off or not. Obviously, guys may or may not remember the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ending racism ad. That did not go over well. So I think they needed to recalibrate and figure out what they know how to do best. But this ad was very fun, and I guess we'll see what happens next for Pepsi.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I feel like throughout my whole childhood there was very much like the Coke versus Pepsi like thing was like a real thing, and now it's just kind of like everybody orders a Coke and they're like, is Pepsi okay? So I think it's gonna be interesting to see if like Pepsi making this like pop culture comeback, if this is going to bring back the ye old battle of Coke versus Pepsi, or if Coke will always reign supreme.
Stay tuned, guys. If you want to hear more about this, we talk about this stuff on our podcast, Name 3 Songs. And now we're getting Candid with Friko. And this is an interview that was very special to me because I discovered this band earlier this year at South by Southwest. It was before Sarah got into town, so I had the unique experience of this happening. I saw them at Midwest House. They were playing with other Midwest bands, which is very funny.
Just a bunch of nice boys playing.
They come from Chicago, so there's definitely that influence of like the Chicago like DIY scene, indie rock music that's come out of there. And it was cool to hear like Niko talk about this in the interview. The band is, when I saw them, they were a 3-piece. I think they've added more members on stage now, but it is the duo that is Niko Kapetan and Bailey Minzenberger. And they have like a really interesting dynamic on stage. And that's what like really caught my attention was like, again, this was like a quite small show with South by. You never know the type of crowd you're gonna get, and they just were like laying it out there on stage. Like I was just very like, this is good, and I was like, wait, this is good, and then I was like, wait, this is like really good. Like as the set went on, I was like more and more invested because I really had no idea who they were, and just like their performance and like Bailey on drums and Niko just like going really hard singing and kind of flailing around on stage. I was all about it. And then it took me a few months before I even like got into their actual like listening to their actual record that came out this year. And once I like sat down and listened to it, I was like, oh my God, I was like, this is for me. Like this record is for me so much. I just love a lot of the storytelling and the weaving of different sounds that's done throughout the record. And so I think it's that feeling like we've shared with you guys on the podcast before of being so excited about like discovering a new artist and being so excited to see what they're going to do next. And then being able to see them on tour and all of that.
Yeah, it was just really funny because I just remember it was like the day before I left for South by, and Jenna's just like texting me. She's like, I've done what I'm supposed to do. We're good. She's like,
what, discovering new music and then networking?
A new artist.
Talking to them about it?
I figured it out. South by completed.
Yeah. You don't need to come now. You can cancel your trip.
I've done it. But yeah, she was just really excited to like share them with me, and it was really cool to like got to know them through Jenna's excitement and then listening and all that. I don't know. I just feel like when like a friend shares music with you that means something to them, it like adds a whole other layer to the music that already has like a lot of layers, because there is so much feeling and emotion in these songs. And then like having that other thing where I'm like, okay, wow, like this means a lot to my best friend too. Like that's crazy. it's a
now
lot.
we're gonna go see him in Brooklyn. It's gonna be great.
Exactly. It's gonna be really fun. It's gonna be really cool. And it was just like cool to chat with Niko and find out like more about like his collaborative process like with Bailey, and also like how the band has like these bigger goals for what their music is and like trying to make the world a better place through their music, which I think is really cool. And just like his songwriting and like lyric writing process and how that has changed over time. And so with that, let's go get candid with Niko.
Hi, Niko. Welcome to the show. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
So kicking things off, you are based in Chicago. You grew up there. It's a city that's quite famous for having like this DIY kind of underground rock scene. And for a lot of artists, like the place they grow up or the place that they live is very influential in the type of music they make. How do you feel like being in Chicago has shaped you as a musician?
I mean, even when I was young, I loved going down to the city, and it felt like such an adventure to like, go down like just into the loop when I was a kid. And I was, even in like middle school, like that would be a very inspiring thing for me when I first started writing songs. But like when we really got into the scene around like 2019, just everybody was so immediately welcoming. And like as time went on and we met more and more people, there was just people from, people who were like 3 or 4 years younger than us to like 5 or 6 years older than us. Everybody was making good music and just like making being nice people. And like recently we got to play with Dead at weirdly enough like a show in Nashville. And like I'd been fans with them. I saw them at the Empty Bottle when I was like 16, opening for Heinz. And just hanging out with them after the show the other day is just yeah, definitely like the Chicago way of being like nice and just cool about things, I feel like.
Yeah. That's like a cool like full circle moment for you.
It was very cool. Very, very
Do you
cool.
feel like in being in a place that's like such a music hub, do you feel like there's kind of this mutual like inspiration to like by being around other musicians and kind of like pushing you to be more creative?
Definitely. I mean, like, because, like when I was in high school, me and my friends listened to Dead, Whitney,
Yeah, Whitney.
now Phenome. So we just were fans of like bands in the scene. And now, like, being like friends with some of them, it's just very cool.
Nice.
I feel like the having like a local music scene as a backbone to something also is like a really, I don't know, like beautiful part of music, especially when you're from like a major city, because it is kind of hard to find those people that you have things in common with. And so in like thinking about that too, like how do you think that like you've been taking part in that community? Like do you feel like that is like a big part of like what has made like making music more fun for you in a way by having that like music community that you can be a part of?
I mean, it's definitely made like it kind of gives a point of like pride, like good
Yeah.
pride, where it's like something to believe in, something like real and honest that you can kind of put yourself towards. And I don't know, like other people that have the same mindset doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It does kind of
Yeah.
just like motivate everybody. And like last night we had a barbecue and like some people from like a couple other Chicago bands were there as well. And yeah, it's just a really nice, it's a cool thing to have. And like I've always loved growing up just like reading and like seeing like videos about like bands and their like local scenes, whether it be like
Yeah.
Minneapolis or New York or wherever it may be. It's just like I think it's a really cool thing to like try and represent a city and represent it well.
Yeah. And I feel like with your debut album, Where We've Been, Where We Go, like, which came out in February, congratulations, by the way, that's very exciting.
Thank you.
But with that, like, it feels like you've really tried to encapsulate kind of like the sound of like Chicago DIY because there was the goal of the record to have it sound live and part of it was recorded live. And so I'm curious, like, was this production something that you went into where you're like, okay, like I want to bring this like Chicago DIY sound into this, and like was this because of the musical roots, or like was there other reasoning behind like wanting to make this like a live record?
I mean, I feel like unconsciously, just like playing in the scene and listening to the Chicago bands that we did, it we
Mm-hmm.
that played into the album. Once it came
Yeah.
time to make the album, it was definitely a larger like plethora of just like a bunch of different bands that we liked and like what we were listening to at the time and like being in the studio, like the best feeling and like that we got with some points on this record. With the next one, I hope we like for the whole thing we can like capture this like in its entirety. But like with like the first song Where We've Been when we recorded that, it was like so completely live and like the vocals from that live take and it just felt like because a lot of time when you make art, it feels like you're like doing something that like you're thinking so much about and you're like this doesn't feel like
Mm-hmm.
an actual like adventure like I'm outside myself. And but when you can
Yeah.
do it and it feels actually live and that can be on recording, that kind of makes you, I don't know, you just feel like it makes you feel alive in that way in making art that doesn't happen very often, I feel like.
Interesting. Yeah. I feel like it's like these two different modes of like music as an expression, like being in a studio and writing music. I feel like kind of what you're getting at is that maybe it can sometimes feel very like clinical or like a
Mm-hmm.
little bit too siloed in itself. Whereas like performing live, especially if you grew up performing live, if you grew up going to a lot of shows, like there's an energy that's so different than like recorded. So did you feel like you were trying to like encapsulate that energy and bring it into the recording?
Yeah, I feel like we discuss a lot, like what the type of music that we want to go for and the type of music that we don't want to go for. And like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like for us, just that really live and genuine and scrappy kind of energy that we bring to our live show, put it on recording is just, it's unique to us, and so like put it on the recording just makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of my favorite records of the year, if I'm being honest. Like, I really think it's such there's so many elements here that I find like really beautiful. There's kind of like this lyrical and sonic storytelling woven throughout the album. And the songs vary a lot between, you know, heavy distortion, the gang vocals, but then also like these piano ballads and like bringing in strings. To me, it feels like there's these themes that kind of make it part of the same like sonic tapestry. So was this something that was intentional for you in the making of the record?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty just like eclectic in our taste, and we love the bass, like the really quiet singer-songwriter stuff. We love orchestral stuff. We love the loud, distorted rock stuff, and I think there's like a crossover for all that stuff. There's like a certain space where that all crosses over, and like we just like to explore that. And I think we're gonna keep trying to like refine that going forward, and like how those things can be refined and like brought together. Because like there's been strings with loud rock bands before, and
Yeah.
there's been like, and the soft loud thing is like what indie rock is, but like yeah, just trying to like make our own take on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for you guys, what was exciting about being able to play with all these different elements?
I think it was just feeling like doing something like more unique, because like we love like just straightforward fun indie rock, but like for us that's only like a part of it. Like we want to like stretch what that is for us,
Mm.
and just like with strings too, like strings are just always so fun to like arrange, and then especially when you're not like in an orchestra doing anything or whatever, like when you go to record strings for a song, it always just feels so magical. So it's like it's just fun to
Yeah.
do. And you have to limit yourself because you can't, I feel like you can end up doing too much strings and that can get corny real quick, but like it's just, yeah, it's just so, because we had Macy Stewart, who's like a Chicago staple. They did strings on Forella, and
Mm.
we had like a basic arrangement for that and like some lines, but eventually we just let them like start building, takes on the violin, and they were just take after take, just building just lines, and it was just, yeah, it was amazing. It's just amazing to see that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool because I was curious when I was like reading about you guys, like how you went about like choosing which artists you brought in to work with you guys, because obviously both you and Bailey play multiple instruments, like you work a lot together in that regard. So there is the possibility, if you wanted to, for you guys to just do it yourselves. So like what was the thought process like in choosing like who you brought in, like in regards to like the violinists, the cellos, like you were just saying, like were you thinking about like what like background they had and like what story they had and what they could bring to the table, or like what was the thought process like in the decision making there?
Yeah, I mean, when we recorded this record, we were still, Luke, the original bassist, was still in the band, and
Okay.
like collaborating is kind of what made this project become a more special thing, I think, because it started with me just doing demos in my basement by myself, and like that was good and like really helpful for me to develop. But I feel like
Mm-hmm.
this record was the first thing that actually, like, even like like compared to the EP, like this record was the first thing that really got through to people, because it was like really like a band in a room, and it was like different people contributing to it, and like different like personalities all contributing to it, and I feel like it made it something special. And the more voices you add, like the harder it can be to like organize all those voices, but like it
Mm.
can be really worth it in the end.
I feel like there must have been an element of trust with these people, of like knowing like the type of art that they make and like knowing them as musicians and trusting them to kind of like you said, collaborate and bring their vision to the record as well.
I mean, yeah, they were just, there's a level of like genuine friendship, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just like that existed with, me, Bailey, and Luke, that existed with Jack and Scott, who worked on producing and engineering the record. And like now with our new bassist and like new guitarists that we play with a lot, we just make sure to establish that like friendship and like kinship out of the gate, because that's kind of the core of it. Especially for this kind of music. Like if you're making like commercial pop music, like you don't need the band to be like, you could hire a band out. Not anything
Yeah.
against like commercial pop music, but
No, I
like,
know exactly what you
you could
mean.
hire a band out for every tour, and it's gonna be okay,
Yeah.
because like it's just a certain type of. But like if you're making like indie rock, like you need that kind of like community feel to it, I feel like, because it's like
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's kind of what it brings to the table, because it's not, no one's really bringing like vocal, or like we're all think like we try very hard our instruments, but like nobody's like super prowess that you see with like a pop singer, or like something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like you kind of need that just like special magic with it that comes from like
Yeah.
working with other people.
No, definitely. I feel like there's that thing of like, even for like a fan in the audience, it's like experiencing the camaraderie on stage when you go to see an indie band, I feel like is very important. Whereas, like, if you go to a pop act, it's kind of like you're there for the singer and like the band is there to play the music perfectly. Whereas, kind of like part of the fun thing with like indie rock and the DIY music scene is that like there could be mistakes. Like, it could kind of feel like something is happening live and you're just going with it and like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean like with our shows, like I always break at least one string at every show. Like there's always like, chords unplugging, and it's kind of like we like to keep it scrappy. I think like it's just kind of what's natural for us. Some bands like
Yeah.
be having it all together on stage and looking like sick and having it all together is like their thing, but for us, it's definitely just like being scrappy and, enjoying it. And like, we have enough sad songs to where it's like, if we're just like having a good time the whole time, where it's like, it brings it down to earth too when we play the sad ones.
Humbling. That was pretty funny. So I know that you and Bailey like studied music theory at one point, and you've talked a lot about like your musical influences, which range like a lot, including like classical composers. So when it comes to like Friko sound and like you creating music, how much of this do you feel like comes from like a studied, methodical like music theory point of view versus breaking the rules and just leading with emotion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're both kind of like, I feel like, because we took that like senior year of high school, and then we both did like 1 year, barely just one semester at college out of high school. And we got some studying then, and then outside of that, we just like to involve ourselves and like study on that stuff. But I think the core of an idea is always going to be just like it just popping up and just like kind of, something popped out of you in that moment and the idea came out. But like using music theory for a song like a song like Get Numb to It, there's not much music theory at all.
Right.
That's all just like live, just
Yeah.
fun loving, like music and emotion, like angsty emotion. But like for Ella was like very much used a lot more complicated chord structures and like, I mean, because I'm a huge, huge fan of Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and like that Brian Wilson was able to make such a complex record that was also so simple, and like all the sentiments were so
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
And so like I like really want to keep exploring that. And like when we write new stuff, like always having something in there for the music heads that's kind of like, oh, okay, that's like slightly different than like what it, normally is. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
keeping it simple enough too, because we love pop music, and like I never want to just be like, you know, making stuff that's just trying to flex that muscle. It's not
Yeah.
cool. It's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's an element of like learning something in like such a structured way, like in a music theory sense. It's almost just kind of like helps inform your understanding like of the craft. And then it's like up to you how much you kind of bring that, and like maybe it even informs you like in a very subconscious way of, I feel it's like you learn the rules and then you can break the rules and do what you want with them.
Totally, yeah. I think it like informs you unconsciously, and then you bring that to when you can bring that like feeling out of yourself, then you can also have that like musical knowledge that can go along with that to help write, stuff that might make more sense musically too,
Mm.
and have the feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And so in thinking about the album, I read that your goal for like the theme of the album was that you wanted it to be about bettering yourself and the people around you, but also like wondering how that can be possible because the world's kind of in the place that it is. And I feel like this is a sentiment for like most like millennials and Gen Zs, like in that feeling of we want to make the world better, we want to make ourselves better, we want to work on ourselves, but sometimes it just feels like what's the point because everything feels a little bit hopeless. But when it comes to music, like that's always been an outlet for people who kind of like are lost and trying to find their footing, and like it feels even more so like that art form is something that people are gravitating towards now because we kind of need something to be like, okay, like I'm not alone in this. And so for you in writing this record, like what was it like confronting those feelings of being like, I want to be better, but is there a point?
I mean, when I was writing this record, I was in this spot where I dropped out of the year of college and then I started working in a warehouse. And I worked there for like 3.5 years. And in that time span was like when I wrote the record pretty much and we recorded it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot, and that's another, because the winters and like Chicago, that's like
Yeah.
definitely a thing that was super inspiring in like a negative way, where it's like the
Yeah.
Chicago winters were very, a lot of stuff got written and done during those times because those were very tough times. But like, it's kind of like, I mean, this is like a very like just like personal, like even like day to day, like thinking like today, like when I woke up, it's just like trying to think, because like we have this like saying that I think is really funny, and we were saying it to be kidding at first, but now I actually like really like it, and we say like it's just music, because it's like it's
Mm.
funny because it's like it's not just music, but like when you find yourself getting caught up in stuff, and there are all these bigger things, like for us, you have to take we take it seriously, more serious than anything else, but
Yeah.
if you see yourself just getting too caught up in it, it's like for us, it's more than the music. And like going
Mm-hmm.
forward, if we like are in a more stable spot financially, just doing music, like
Mm-hmm.
doing things for, wherever it may be, like it's more important to be more than a band for us. And I know like,
Yeah.
Bailey feels the exact same way. I mean, that's kind of the ethos we share as a band, because like you need to write good music to get to a point to be able to like, I think like make change as an artist, or like do what you,
Yeah.
I don't know, because like also if you're just gonna do music, you need to be able, like anybody, you need to be able to financially support yourself before you
Yeah.
can kind of
Yeah.
like really branch out and help other people how you want to. And yeah, that's just like a goal for us, is just to be more than just the music, more than just, a band with that, and just trying how we can.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think like it's that thing of like you have this talent and this ability and like a platform, and it's like some people don't utilize like the platform and like the audience that they have in order to like, I don't know, like actually move forward with their personal views where they're like, okay, like I want to be able to use this to like amplify my voice and like help better things for tomorrow. And I think it's really inspirational in a way when you hear artists be like, yeah, like the goal is not to just be like, okay, yeah, we make music, but also like what can we do with this? Because I think even like with the type of music that you make, it's also like you're attracting a certain type of audience as well. And I think that like I don't know, like I grew up like really into emo music, and so it's like when a band is making music for a bunch of really sad kids, like you kind of want to like do something for
Yeah,
them and for the community and like that kind of thing. So I think that's really like admirable.
thank you. I mean, it's like, I mean, you guys do it in your own way, and like everybody should just at least try to do it in their own way. It's
Yeah.
kind of just like having that mindset where it's like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it should be obvious to people.
Yeah.
You think.
Yeah, you think.
I think also what you said in this phrase of like it's just music is kind of
Mm,
interesting, because I feel like it's almost this reminder of like you can take something very seriously and you can be very dedicated and like methodical about how you approach it, but also like you need to remind yourself like you're doing this because you love it. Like you're doing this because it's fun, because it brings you joy,
Yeah,
because it helps you feel things.
yeah.
And it's sometimes it's like it's not so serious. Like it doesn't need to be so serious. Like
yeah.
it's so silly that like we're on this planet and like this is the thing that we're all love and care about, and like doing it because like you love it, you know?
No, exactly. And it's like we're not like, doctors, where it's like you're like that's like a huge difference. For doctors
Yeah.
in a country of war, it's just like it is definitely a reference point where it's like, chill out, and like whatever you're feeling, to try and write some good music to help some more people, hopefully. Because like,
Yeah.
yeah, but that phrase is definitely funny, because it's like obviously like for us it's like music is everything, but like
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great thing to remember, because it is like so silly sometimes when we're on tour, and it's like crazy to just do that every night, and just, yeah,
Yeah.
grateful for it.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's also that thing of like I don't know, everybody knows like in music there's like so much ego at play as well, and I think you kind
Hmm.
of have to have an ego in order to like get up on stage and be like, people need to hear what I'm saying, and like I mean it in like a complimentary way, but I think also it's that having that like band statement of like a joke that's not really a joke, of being like it's just music, it brings you back down to earth. And I think that like a lot of artists kind of need that moment where you're like, okay, like yes, what we're doing is like really cool and awesome, and it's like helping people and all these things, but also at the same time like it's just music, like be so real, you know. I feel like
Yeah,
that's really positive.
yeah.
Humbling for your
Yeah,
And we,
ego.
we want to make impactful music that says, that really says stuff. But like,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, even with that, it is just music.
So in the making of this record, coming back to kind of like this original sentiment of like seeing the world around you and things, wanting to do better and be better, but sometimes feeling that like struggle with like the society that we've grown up with and all these things. Do you feel like through music you're able to tap into like a level of emotion or expression that's easier for you, like essentially using music as an easier form of expression than kind of having to sit with yourself in like these more difficult emotions?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's truly like the only thing where I can like actually express that like fully. I am not a very coherent person day to day, and like in how I speak, and like you can like ask my friends or like anybody, I like do not speak in full sentences. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the easiest answer to that is just like, yes, like by far. It's the only way for me I can do it. And I know Bailey feels the same because Bailey is very passionate about these same things that we're discussing. And like
yeah,
the fact that like we love doing music, but like you need to have those discussions on everything else that's going on around you. Because I feel like also when you do that, you can end up taking the music too seriously again and then write music that has too much thought and it's like not good. It's
yeah,
hard to separate those two parts of your brain. Because like
yeah.
sometimes when you write a song, you could just be saying the most basic things and it could get through the most like complex idea versus if you say
Yeah.
like the most complex like word twisting things and people are just like shut up, like too much, like
I think we all know a few lyricists
Yeah.
like that in our
yeah,
lifetime.
yeah.
So like with you saying that, like speaking for you sometimes feels a little bit difficult, like was there a point in time when like did you journal? Like was songwriting something that you had always done? Like how did you realize that putting your thoughts and like these emotions into song was like the best way for you to like really figure out like what you were going through?
I like just started working on GarageBand in middle school, and
Mhm.
like it was the type of thing where it's like my mom and dad owned like diners growing
Mhm.
up, to like diners in the city, and
Mhm.
like my dad was an aspiring musician though when he was growing up, but his dad was like classic like old Greek and like would not let him do that at all ever.
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
he was very supportive, and my mom was very supportive too. She was a college dropout and she's just always been like a very freewheeling type person, and she's just a
Mhm.
very good person as well. And so like they've been very supportive. So when I started just working GarageBand in middle school, I just kind of kept doing it and I do it every day, and like it was the type of thing where it was natural and I just never
Mhm.
stopped doing it. And after like
Yeah.
3 or 4 years, my parents were like, oh, well, maybe we should get like an 8 track like recording thing for the basement. And then I used that to record for the next 4 years. And yeah, it just kind of steadily moved along. Because I feel like with that
Mhm.
type of thing, it's like either you like fell into it because your parents are like musicians and like they like brought you along for the ride, or
Yeah.
you just found out about this thing and you just couldn't pull yourself away from it.
Yeah. It's just like that thing where like being comfortable with your feelings is hard. And I feel like it's something that everybody really struggles with. And so being able to have like music as an outlet, I think is really cool, because like when I was growing up, like all I wanted to do is be in a band, and I just did not have the skill set, was not there. Like it was not programmed into my brain. It was not accessible to me. And so I always find it really impressive when people are like, yeah, I was just like able to like write songs or like figure this out. And so for you also, like in the creation of this record, like how did you go about like lyrically encapsulating these emotions like into song? Like what was that process like for you?
During this record, like writing this record, I feel like halfway through we realized kind of like who we were as a band musically and like in our relationships to each other as musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And like lyrically, for me, I kind of felt like I'd first done something that felt like truly me was when the first song Where We've Been, I kind of just it was near the end of like the writing cycle for this record, and I
Mm-hmm.
had kind of written like 80% of those lyrics in one sit down session and like an hour when I just that song just kind of came out, and like
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time I wrote without thinking at all, and like
Mm-hmm.
just literally just mindlessly. And so like now I really try and write like that, and I've been having more and more success with that because like for me, everybody's different. Like for me, I'm not like someone who can write poetry, but when
Mm-hmm.
I write something musically that I can sit in enough and it feels like us like as a band,
Mm-hmm.
then stuff can flow out.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
realized for me, that's kind of the best way for me to do that. Because, yeah, I never studied English. I always got bad grades in that. I was not good with writing at all.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, if everybody found the thing that they could, like, express themselves in, I think we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have as much of these problems, you know? I think
I would
True.
people
agree with
just,
that.
So
somehow people
true.
can't find
I would
that.
agree with that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like the lyrics on this record, well, number one, you play with song structure a lot. Like it's not like the verse, chorus, bridge format that everyone's used. Like it's not pop structure, but I think that adds this element of like tension and emotion just to the overall like feeling and storytelling of like the songs in the record. But also like lyrically, I think it's very interesting because you give us like very specific details without giving us everything, which I think is like an interesting way to like be a little bit mysterious, be a little bit more like covert about things. But also at the same time, it's kind of like you were saying before, it's like saying less, but it's like more emotionally packed. And I think the way you write, as well as like the way that you've been able to like kind of mirror the lyrics with the tension of the music itself.
Oh, thank you. I think it's kind of like we were saying, like if you're trying to say something in a song, you can try and say that thing, but in the end, it's only you can only say as much as like it'll work in the song. So like yeah, in the end, it's just about it being a good song and like all the classic, when you think of like old songs that have lasted 40, 50 years, they have like the simplest sentiments, and it just works because it's just like the music holds up those simple sentiments. Whereas like if those things were being said just as like poetry or just like straight out loud, it might be corny or not really feel authentic or genuine, but
Mm-hmm.
behind the music, it does feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's interesting thinking of like, recorded music and like the act of like putting all this together is like very much like one part of the process. And then we were kind of talking about this before, but the live music aspect is like such a different form of expression and also of art. And I feel like from seeing you guys at South by, and you've been touring a lot this year, it's very clear that you're very immersed in the music. Like when all of you are performing together, do you feel like you have to tap into a certain emotional state in order to bring these songs to life on stage?
I think with performance and especially live stuff, there's special shows that feel special because of the energy around them. Maybe it's a hometown show, maybe it's like an album release show or whatever. And those will naturally kind of like build up and have that special feel. If you're
Mm-hmm.
on the road playing night by night, there's going to be a lot of shows that do not feel like that at
Yeah.
all. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
some shows may feel kind of shitty to play. And kind of that's where just like the repetition of it and kind of just like, all right, well, we need to do this. Just that's where it does become kind of a job sometimes, where it's like we're still enjoying ourselves, but it's like, there's five people in the room, none of them care about what we're doing right now, and we're going to try to enjoy ourselves, but sometimes it can be hard. But that's why you need to have
Mm-hmm.
good dynamics within the band and like
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
friendship. Like we always talk about, like, how is it possible for bands to tour all the time, especially from the start, like, and not be friends? Like we talk about the Smashing Pumpkins, like they didn't like each other from like album one. Like
Yeah.
how the hell do you do that? Like
Yeah.
it's so hard to tour and play different places every night. Like you need that kinship.
Yeah. And like you're sharing such an emotional moment together because like we've talked to a bunch of other artists before about like the kind of euphoric feeling you get from performing live, and it's just kind of like this very natural high from like sharing that emotional give and take with the crowd regardless of like how good the show is. And so like I can only imagine like what it's like having to experience that with people you don't like. Like that must be so weird. And so like for you, like what is it like processing that kind of like high and low of coming off of stage?
I mean, sometimes I feel like I've leveled out more, especially with touring, because you kind of have
Mm.
to. Because if you
Yeah.
take every show way too heavily, you're
Yeah.
just gonna like get distraught. Like there have been shows in the past where like I've walked off stage and like went and like sat in the bathroom and just fucking cried because and I'll reset that sentence. But I like just walked. There's been shows where I just walk off the stage and like gone and sat in the bathroom and cried because it was just like it was so bad. But then other shows you feel on top of the world. And I
Yeah.
think, especially now, I feel like we've
Mm-hmm.
found that like when it feels good, we like to like stay in that and just absorb that because that's a great feeling and just like especially with like a Chicago show and seeing all of our friends or family
Yeah.
afterwards, we can just use that to just have a good time. But like with bad shows, we kind of just we'll get off stage and we'll probably just start joking about it and like I don't know, just like the thing is if you're like touring, it's like you can just be like, all right, well, let's just like have a drink, have a smoke, whatever, do whatever, and go get like a nice like late night dinner and treat ourselves to like not
Yeah.
nice, but like I don't know, some like a cheeseburger. I don't know, but like we'll just like
A little treat. It's
A
okay.
little
yeah,
treat.
a
A
little
little
treat.
treat.
It's just a little treat. You just gotta like, yeah. It's kind of the whole thing with like not taking it too seriously with a bad show,
Yeah.
because like
Yeah.
unless it was something where it's like between the band, like there was like animosity on stage for whatever reason, it's like
Yeah.
most of the time there's things you can't control. Maybe the sound person wasn't very
Mm-hmm.
helpful. The
Yeah.
sound in the venue just wasn't good. There's just so many things you can't control
Yeah.
with live
And I mean,
music.
like, you guys have been touring a lot this past year, and you have like a big tour coming up as well. And like, I'm curious to you, like, in performing in front of like all these different audiences, like night after night, and like thinking again back to like the sentiment of the album of being like wanting to be better, wanting to bring people together to like possibly make the world a better place, like that kind of thing. Like, do you feel like that sentiment is kind of also mirrored in the frame of like concerts of like people coming together to enjoy something outside of like their daily lives and like whatever they're going through?
Yeah, I mean, when there's like, I feel like everybody has like at least one, hopefully more than one show in their life where they felt like that true,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
community going to a place for like one reason, especially when it's for like that one reason is like hearing a bunch of songs that everyone in that room connects with.
Yeah.
Like that is one of the most special things I think you can
Mm-hmm.
experience. So yeah, I mean, especially when like when we play these Chicago shows now, like the last one in Lincoln Hall just felt so special. And like it's because it's our hometown. Like
Yeah.
hopefully sometime in the future, like there's gonna be more and more cities that it can feel like this. But like yeah, it just feels like by the time we got to the last song, like getting onto it in our set, it's just everybody was just like it would just felt like a madhouse and it was just like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was such a nice time. And then we
Yeah.
like to go go to the merch table afterwards and say hi to
Yeah.
people. Cause yeah, with that respect too, like with like doing that kind of stuff, it's like that's another thing with like the it's just music kind of mentality where it's like if you going and talking to these people for like 2 seconds or signing a record is like can help them or like make them feel happier, like that's such an easy thing to do, you know?
Yeah. No, literally, for sure. For sure. No, but I think that that's such like a good sentiment because like we said, like name three songs, like the whole thing is like we want fangirls and like people that are part of fandom to like feel empowered and like what they love and just be like, yeah, that's cool. Like the artists respect that. And so like for you, obviously we already said like on stage between like an artist and the crowd, there is kind of like that energy exchange of like experiencing something together. But then what is that like after the show when you do meet these people and they're either people who have like listened to your band before, but also like the new people coming up and being like, wow, I really like felt something and it felt like I was experiencing that with you.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing that you need like if you don't play many shows for like a while, it's like you that's and maybe you're recording or writing, you don't get that like kind of like immediate like feedback that just
Yeah.
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 that's kind of like where it's at that like keeps you going. That's
Yeah.
definitely the core of it. And yeah, I mean that's like definitely some of the best moments for sure. And yeah, like for a selfish reason too, like I love going to the merch table and talking to these people because it's like yeah, a lot of times with music, like other than shows, like it's kind of just like you're working at stuff and you don't really get
Mm-hmm.
that payoff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just great to like yeah have that immediate feedback.
I'm
It's
like, it's
beautiful.
me. I'm the new person after your show at South by coming to say I loved your music.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's, especially with South by, because it's crazy. I mean, you never know. You could play the worst show of your life or the best at South by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cool. Well, to wrap things up in a nice little bow, as Sarah mentioned, the ethos of our podcast is to empower fangirls, and we think it's important to celebrate the things that we love. So, Niko, what are you a fangirl of?
I like Miyazaki movies.
Nice.
I'm freaking huge fan. I'm a fangirl of like, this is a weird one, but like breakfast. I like grew up with my parents owning diners. So
Okay.
like I love like we'll make like crunchy French toast, like rainbow French toast, which is basically you make French toast, but like you put it in like frosted flakes or like it's like covered in like fruity pebbles or stuff. And like I don't know. I'm trying to think what else.
Were you a fangirl of going to Japan recently?
Oh, Japan? Yes, I'm a fangirl of Japan. That was the most amazing thing ever. And the food there. Gyoza and udon and everything. Yeah. I don't know. It was just like we were already discussing like maybe we could move there sometime in the future.
Nice.
I'm trying to think
record
of a
there for a
musical.
while.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. There's like a site on Instagram where I'm definitely a fangirl of this site where they post like houses in Japan that are extremely cheap. Like
Oh
you
my
can
God.
buy a house for like $15,000, like buy one. And there was also one that was free if you maintain it because it's like a historical site. And
Oh
it was just like a
man.
beautiful place. Japanese architecture.
I think you guys should just go do that for a year and write a record and see what happens.
I would do that in a second. Oh my God, if the flight wasn't so long. Like that's another thing, melatonin. That like
Like
when
I'm
we had the- 'cause
Melatonin's
we had
number
the-
one fan.
Yeah, melatonin's number one fan. When we had to fly, because we had to do like the two 15 or 14-hour flights and then one like 3-hour flight and like a week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like just taking like double dose of melatonin, like you fall asleep for like 10 of those hours, like it's amazing. You know? And as long as you don't
You're like best
take
sleep
it,
of
like,
my life,
too often.
actually.
Yeah, best sleep of my life.
Okay, well, thank you, Niko, for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you guys.
As you guys could hear throughout the interview, one of my favorite bands of this year. I'm excited to see them live again when they're on tour with Royel Otis. But for me, it's such a pleasure to sit down and kind of talk to the artists about like what they're working on. And I think that they have a very unique approach to what they're doing and a very unique way that they're exploring music. And I think that was really evident from Niko's perspective on songwriting. And at the end of the day, it's just music, guys. We're all just on this rock that's floating in space, doing the best we can.
Yeah, it was really funny because it just felt like while we were talking about this, it's like the ego death thing.
Yeah. What's happening in real time while we're
it's happening like obviously like this is something that he and Bailey take part in to kind of like ground themselves, I think, in like this world of music, especially because of like how quickly they have been like seeing success, you know, like it feels like it has happened relatively fast. That I'm sure like having that moment like with your friend and your bandmate of being like, okay, like let's remember
this is so silly.
Yeah, this is just like so silly goofy that we get to do this, but also at the same time like having the goal of being like, okay, like we want to bring kind of like joy and hope and like an escape system to like the people who listen to the music and who come to the shows, I think is really cool. And like hearing Niko talk about like experiencing that when like they meet fans after the shows, I think was also really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for getting candid with us and Friko. This has been Sarah and Jenna from Name 3 Songs.
And to get your pop culture fix, you can listen to new episodes of Name 3 Songs podcast on your favorite podcast platform.